It's time to talk about a little bit of Sony censorship, but this time round, it is not anime titty.
No, this time it is. It's something that the UK has run into before, historically speaking.
Yeah.
And it's funny that all things that have happened must happen again in media.
It is time for the video nasties. So, Sony have interfered with for some people, very promising and interesting indie horror game. And of course, this story of Sony and, censorship and standards in the PlayStation platform has been a very interesting one. I think for a lot of people, just that, I think it was some of the Senran Kagura games, or just the idea that there are more risque games on the Nintendo Switch than on the PlayStation is just bizarre to people, given, you sort of think big, polished, more adult blockbusters is Sony, and Nintendo's family friendly. So, this game, Martha is Dead, is actually coming out on the 24th of February, so might even be out by the time you see this. It's made by LKA, who are an Italian indie dev. They previously made The Town of Light, which is a psychological horror game. Critically, it landed in the 60s, but it's actually a mostly positive in Steam, so players enjoyed it. And it's published by Wired Productions, who are very varied. They have an anime fishing game, Pool Nation. Also, The Falconeer, which is, I think, the one that most people will have seen in storefronts.
Yeah, because it's a BAFTA nominee.
Yeah, Victor Vran, and now Martha is Dead. So I think they just publish interesting shit.
Yeah, they publish. They publish interesting things. They publish whatever they like, and based on what our research into Martha is Dead has shown, this game is certainly interesting. And I think the comparison to The Falconeer, which is a BAFTA nominee, is probably a good way to think about it when we think about. Because obviously you can think of horror games, you can think of the likes of Agony, which is literally just, here's a horror game that's its core goal is titillation and to be just sort of gore for the sake of it. Martha's Dead's very different.
Yeah, so it is a dark first-person psychological thriller set in 1944 Italy that's trying to blur the lines between reality, superstition, and the tragedy of war, where you play as Martha's sister. And Martha is indeed actually dead. Which is hardly a surprise. But you're the young daughter of a German soldier, which is maybe not the angle people would have thought they would have went with, so that's interesting. And you must alone deal with the acute trauma of loss and the fallout from her murder. And this is all shrouded in folklore and, of course, the horror of war, taken a bit more to the extreme. So, first-person horror thriller. It launches with Italian audio, being the default for, authenticity, which, I 100% would support doing that. Photo mode that requires the player to actually develop their own shots with an in-game, authentically recreated darkroom. So, you know what? So far, it's like, okay, you're going to interesting places. You're putting in effort in cool ways. Seems interesting.
Yep, like for how interesting, to try to get across how interesting I think this game is that I despise horror stuff. I do not like it whatsoever. But I really am very sold on playing this.
Wow.
Yep.
Well, as for what people were expecting, massive optimism, glowing previews from the press in August. Here, just for some quotes. Its willingness to explore gore through a more artistic lens. It has a spooky, isolated locale akin to Silent Hill and a focus on photography similar to Fatal Frame, strong emphasis on supernatural and psychological elements, potential to become a cult classic. One of the most messed up experiences I've had in gaming in a long time, and in the best way. So it actually seems like this is a great game made by an interesting team who are learning a lot from their previous release. So at this stage, we're thinking it's all set up for this to be a really great hit. I mean, they were able to get the Falconeer out pretty far, so clearly this is a publisher that can get this game onto all the different platforms, get it these press previews, going pretty good, right, Matt?
Yes. And then Sony happened.
Sony have interfered. Let's dive into the meat of their statement.
Yep. So the publisher and dev had to say this. Martha is Dead is a narrative adventure recommended for adult audiences only, with play consisting of potentially discomforting scenes and themes that may distress some players. Both Wired Productions and LK have always been open and honest about Martha is Dead content, with the sensitive depictions in play consistently communicated to the media since the game was announced in 2019. The content is also flagged clearly and repeatedly within the game itself before play begins, so there's no chance of you getting accidentally really destroyed by any of this stuff.
They're being responsible.
Yeah, absolutely. By all accounts, fine. It is with regret that we have had to modify the experience on the PS5 and PS4 versions, with some elements no longer playable. After over 4 years of passion and hard work, developer LK now requires extra time to make these unplanned changes, which delays the PS4 and PS5 version, but not the Xbox and PC variants.
Well, Sony will lose out.
Yep.
So, yeah, modified on those consoles. Because it's unexpected, it's going to take them more time. PlayStation delayed. Ouch. And everyone else, of course, gets an objectively better product because it is the developer's full experiences. Now, they haven't said exactly what's going to be modified, but definitely, there is extreme content in this game.
Very extreme.
Not something they've been shying away from, so if you're buying this, you know what you're getting into. Well, let's just take a look then at some of this stuff. So as the narrative progresses, it's depicting surreal nightmare sequences of intense violence. The character that the player is actually controlling. So and remember, this is a first-person game.
Yep.
So this isn't like just seeing, a third-person thing. No, this is going to be very visceral. Cutting the face off a corpse and wearing its flesh. Cutting a corpse's stomach open and pulling out a dead fetus. Character slitting her wrists open. One sequence depicts a character shooting a bound woman off screen, then burying the dismembered corpse.
All very brutal, but not to be completely unexpected from a game that's setting out to be a horrific experience and a horrific lens which to view the human experience in the war.
Yeah, and it's adults. It's a game by adults, for adults, clearly labeled for adults. So, I entirely support artists being able to do whatever they want. And broadly after that, market will kind of help to decide. Like, if someone just goes and does, there's obviously areas where, you go into that, you're playing with fire, you're going to get into a lot of trouble. Even Duncan Jones, he made one of my favorite movies, Moon. He also did Warcraft. But, there is let's just say, a scene in that movie where a certain character is interested in pantsu. In a deeply inappropriate way. Now it's something that, from Jones's perspective, is going to make complete sense of the narrative, the story, and all of that. But for some people, it was just like, okay, now you went too far. I don't like this. Yeah. So there's always going to be that, which does not rely on sort of platform censorship. But obviously, I would also completely support the right of a platform to house whatever content they want.
Yeah.
Sony should not be forced to sell this game. If they don't want to. Being on their platform is not a right. It is a privilege. It's something that Sony grants to you. So if Sony say, you'll have to change these things because that's just across the line for us, well, the only thing I would say is if Sony led them to believe that some of this was okay and then changed their mind, then I think that would be acting improperly. But if this... if this is just the sort of thing where Sony didn't really know everything they were letting onto their platform, they find out and it's not in line with their guidelines, then yeah, fair enough. Yeah. And in the same way that for a lot of anime games means that people are playing them in PC or Switch, well, that's Sony's loss to make.
Yeah, for sure. I think most of what's sort of taking issue with from the developers and fans of the game is that it was very last second. Yeah. It was very last minute.
That's where I want to know more about the communications.
Yeah.
Were Sony reviewing builds of this game? How did this actually come to be? That's what I really want to know.
Yeah. Well, I have a vague theory on this, but it is literally just that. It's just a theory. But okay. I'll get into that a little bit later.
So really, Sony, yeah, it's just them enforcing what is totally their right to enforce. It's just a question of, was the communication open and honest between these parties through the development process? I would have liked to have thought that if it was, none of this would have happened. That said, has happened before. Doki Doki Literature Club. That's actually very much on my to-play list. Yep. So suffice to say, that game is not what it appears to be.
No.
In any way. And for a lot of people, that's what makes it delightful and brilliant. Yep. But they had to alter a self-harm scene a bit for PlayStation. Now, for them, they didn't mind doing that.
Yeah, and they knew ahead of time.
Yeah. So, in that case, it was reasonable. So the difference in tone there, I think, is quite notable. Now, for them, though, they had to do a single scene change in a stylized visual novel. That's a lot easier to do. Martha is Dead, though, is photoreal gameplay, right?
Yeah.
Like complex first-person animation. So it is a lot more work to change that for a game like, like Martha. But I mean, the difference is quite stark in sort of communications between the devs, which maybe makes you think they've had a slightly different experience.
Yeah, because that's the thing where, Salvato says he designed the changes himself for DDLC. He's like, yep, I did it all. I think this is perfectly fine. We kind of knew ahead of time, etc. I wouldn't have accepted compromise. But over for LKA, they regret having to modify the experience, and it's unplanned changes and unexpected changes, which to me implies that someone with a bit more authority caught wind of this game and its content closer to release, and they went, wait, what the fuck are we releasing?
Sounds
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Whereas everyone below that was, had a different line in the sand, and that wasn't completely clear the whole way down the chain. So I think that's because obviously that is stuff it's pretty horrific. You could imagine people having an emotional reaction, which I think is where some people have some of the issues with Sony, where it seems to be a little bit arbitrary and a little bit cultural as opposed to making any sort of business sense or anything like that. But
yeah, it does make you wonder. I mean, it almost makes you wonder, like, are they trying to avoid... I'm imagining, like, what an angry headline in, like, The Sun or The Mail is going to be.
that's my theory. Yeah.
Where they just... Sony, that's the people who are marketing the game that's on your bus and your tube station. They publish this that has boobs and this that has fetus ripping out and stuff.
Yeah.
Woo! Like, maybe they're trying to play to that, like, humongous broad audience to the point where they just don't want the potential of catching flack for this sort of thing.
Yep, that's where we'll eventually get in to talk about some of the times it's happened in the past in the UK.
Yeah. So there's this going on. Of course, certain Japanese things have also changed.
Yep.
Right. So Sony Censors strike a Switch gets 20 ladies while PS4 gets 20 bunnies. So some. I'm very confused now.
Oh yeah, literally, like this game is just here's the 20 ladies. Here's a version where they're all anthropomorphic bunnies instead.
Oh, I was waiting for like there's a lens flare over the boba.
No. This is. Yep.
Wow. Interesting. Well, there you go.
Yep.
Oh man, so I think these are Sony censoring content on their platform. I think in a way that'll hit two pretty different audiences pretty differently.
Mm-hmm.
So are there double standards then? Right, indies being forced to modify their content, whereas first-party and partner studios can be gruesome. So the upcoming GTA 5 Next Gen Edition, will that be unscathed in PlayStation, despite there being an entire mission around pulling teeth and electrocution?
Yep.
As methods of torture. Why is Mortal Kombat 11 not coming under fire for fatalities that also have face removal? I mean, I think people would come in and say first-person perspective, overall tone and context, but people will still think about that. Last of Us Part 2, there's killing the pregnant woman. There's, the murder by golf club. There's the killing of dogs. I think there's like crucifixion stuff as well.
I believe so.
So all of that going on, and I can think quite obviously why all of those things would be a bit more okay, given, granularity of player participation, first-person controls, things like that. But obviously, the second you do this, you open yourself up to this kind of analysis.
Yep, for sure.
So then, for, the context then, GTA is a satire. You can get away with that.
Mm-hmm.
Mortal Kombat, like... those are so gruesome is a part of it basically being super pulpy.
Yeah, Mortal Kombat's always had that in its history of, this is really grotesque, why are we getting away with this? And everyone's like, it's clearly not meant to be horrific. It's clearly, the player experience of playing those games is, it's a fighting game, it's really goofy. You want to do a fatality or a babality where you turn them into a baby, or, I can't remember what the friendship fatalities are called, but you make friends of them instead of killing them. Stuff like that's all kind of in its DNA. It's like, it's fine, even though the studio has had issues with this is reporting from maybe a year or two ago now, but how people working on Mortal Kombat are, for the photoreal aspect of it, are told to, I don't want to say force, but basically the part of their job is to look at how people die in these ways to really visually recreate it effectively. And
Gruesome
that's
stuff.
that's the gruesome stuff. But that's for the developer, not for the player. The player just
Yeah.
gets that looks kind of funny.
And then for Last of Us, I mean, feels like a TV show.
Yep.
All right, it feels like a big modern TV show, like sort of thing you'll get in Thrones or whatever. And also it's third person, so it's less detached.
Theoretically.
Now, the worst for Martha is Dead is, well, the intimate desecration of a corpse is the way we're going to put it.
Yep.
And that's in a first-person photoreal horror game. So you can see how that's just so much more, it's just going to have so much more punch.
Yep.
Then also just the interactive element.
Yeah, because that's the thing. It's like implied that the content is actually still in the game. It's just that it's not connected to gameplay. Not sure if that's completely true or not, but that's sort of the implication we've been reading into things.
Yeah, because
Where
it's not
all
like
the stuff will be here, but
press F to take your sister's face. It is take your sister's face using our mini game,
yeah,
which, you know, is a mini game that they're going to be able to, you know, juice the UX for and do all of that to make it one of the, you know, the best face removal and wearing experience in gaming.
yeah. I mean, obviously, I think it's
Probably
obvious.
going to try hard.
It's obvious to anyone, I think, who's obviously you might be grossed out by that, but that's going to work. You're going to feel really fucked up doing that, and that's their goal. So
Yeah,
it is unfortunate
absolutely.
that if you want to have the experience that they really want you to feel, in the same way that a game like Nier Automata couldn't work if it wasn't a video game, because of how player interaction works at certain parts of it. It's the kind of thing where if you want that real experience that only video games can give you, and the likes of a horror movie can't, then Sony are like, sorry, you're going to have to shop elsewhere.
Of course, people who know cinema are, they're not going to be surprised by this. Because number one, abrasive Italian horror title. That's a thing.
Yep.
You know, some Euro movies that are pretty hardcore. Yep. I've forgotten the name. Is it The Platform? It's like a Spanish horror that's also like, it gets pretty brutal. I think it's on Netflix. But yes, no, abrasive Italian horror that has to be edited down to meet the standards of genteel English-speaking audiences.
Yeah.
Totally a thing.
Yep.
Totally a thing.
Definitely.
A game featuring gratuitous violence primed to draw attention from mainstream media in the, you know, good old-fashioned moral panic way, which makes us think of the video nasties.
Yep. It's exactly the same thing.
Yep, so basically just, you know, movies that were so graphic that they would be distributed, like, you know, just people being like, hey, here's the tape.
Yeah.
You know, like that. Of course, Cannibal Holocaust. That would be the big one, and that was also a, you know, super violent Italian movie. Mm-hmm. They certainly got up to interesting things. Now, that prompted Mary Whitehouse to do a whole bunch of, you know, moral crusading. That led to the whole video nasties thing because she was trying to clean up the media. But in that case, actually, it ended up, as it turns out, being a distributor called Go Video. They sent the movie to her as a PR stunt. So really, video nasties, even though it was like, you know, part of somebody who was trying to take all these things down, turns out they were actually used for marketing. So it's pretty smart from the PR company, or from the, you know, the distributor.
Yeah. So for anyone who isn't from the UK or doesn't understand the history, Mary Whitehouse is basically an old lady version of Jack Thompson.
There we go. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So while this is not what Sony wanted to do, I think we can all agree, because I didn't know about this game.
Yep.
Let me know. Yes, just a simple yes, no in the comments. Did you know about this game before this story? Now now it's also a more niche game, so they're going to be filtering through. There's a lot of awareness, but that will be filtered through the level of niche that this game is. But I think this is going to be a big net positive for them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
Definitely.
Yep, that's one thing that it's always kind of the fear when it comes to censorship stuff. You can easily go, oh, well, yeah, this is per devs. They're being, you know, their artistic vision's been censored on a platform. But you can also, the possibility of using it as a grift is always there. Now, I don't think this is the case in any capacity here, but it does have the benefit of, you know, depending on what price it is, because if it's full price, probably not, because I'm not that interested. But if this is like reasonably priced, there's a decent chance I'll just pick it up on Steam and play it. Yeah.
If you refuse to watch Hill House because you could get too spooked, you're going to fucking die. This game's going to kill you.
It's a video game, and I love video games. So especially when they're trying to push the medium in this particular way, in a way that's like, we're going to test the depth of what you as a human can experience through this medium. I'm absolutely going to give it a try.
I'm going to come into the office one day and you'll be crawling around on all fours screaming. In fairness, sometimes that happens anyway.
Yep.
So just imagine like what happens when someone from The Sun looks at Martha is Dead, looks at some of the most gratuitous scenes and starts to farm headlines. I think that might be why Sony wants to, because Sony almost got flack for some of The Last of Us Part 2's content.
Almost, yeah.
You know, they were brushing that line with the mainstream media, it sort of seemed. I think purely because they have vastly different and very unfair standards between video games and not video games.
Yeah.
So if video games are going to get more scrutiny and this exists, yeah, maybe Sony just won out.
Yeah, it's awkward that, you know, coming from I guess a game connoisseur and consumer who's very interested in the medium, I would immediately say, Sony, you're fucking cards, and they should not, you know, hold back this indie dev's artistic expression because they're afraid of what the Sun headline will be. But also they're running a business, and fair enough to them. I think that's why so many of us, rather, were so in love with Steam. Especially, obviously the quality of what appears on Steam sometimes takes a bit of a dive.
Sometimes you go to new games, you know, the ones that are just, they're not filtered by anything, it's just the new stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of... Well, you can definitely tell the change in policy Valve made recently.
Yeah, absolutely. But obviously that lets stuff that's really high quality through, that's really worth experiencing as someone alive. And I think that's why we love Steam so much, because it values freedom, it values that freedom of expression. Obviously there's times I've run into issues there because they're also running a platform, but they're a little bit less beholden to massive PR waves that Sony are like to do. Because obviously you can't have all your claw striders and train stations in the UK being like, hey, this is the big new game, and also have a headline, the PlayStation lets you rip fetuses out of people, because that's what the Sun would run with, and it would work. People will be talking about it.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate, but it's I guess the question is, or is it about what Sony are creatively happy with? Do they really care versus the media and PR response? I imagine Sony would like to let this through, and I imagine that's why it got up until the end of like, it's releasing this week and they've had to announce this. I imagine someone at the top went, fair enough that you guys are happy with this, but I'm not, and I can't let this is too dangerous.
Yeah. So that's basically the story.
Yep.
I think. Look, did you know about this before this story kicked off? Yes or no? Let us know in those comments, and I think that will start to give us a little bit of an idea of just how much awareness and free PR Sony have actually given this game. Because ultimately, they're going to get this from so many more eyeballs purely because of this stunt.
For sure.
So yeah, right, that's it for us. Look, check out the video, and we will see you next time.